Let's start by talking about what we mean when we say women in the modern world. We used to say in the 1970s that the concept of woman was we called it an unstable category because women, of course, were of all kinds and very different from each other. Does that still apply, or is there now a coherence when we use the term women that didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago?
Great question. It is still an unstable category, but I think we're living out that moment sort of on steroids. I mean, I think that as a society, women has gone from trying to fill out that category to make sure that it made sense or was a category that sort of conveyed the experiences of lots of different types of women. If we're thinking about the United States, to a point now where we've got a transgender rights movement that is expanding the category of women, and also gender roles are changing. The way people work, the way they want to have their relationships. So I think what woman has meant over time remains very dynamic, particularly in this moment.
But let me ask you specifically about black women then.
Yeah.
Because it used to be that the division was between white women and black women, or women of color and white women. But black women now seems to be an equally unstable category. That is, it's impossible to talk about black women and mean a single thing when we do that.
Sure. So we see inklings of that in the 1970s, the 60s and 70s, and women's movements when African American women in particular often refused the label feminist and chose the label womanist. So there was already a distinction being made from what was understood to be a kind of liberal white feminist movement. Today, through sort of concepts like intersectionality and other ways of thinking about the world, we understand that black women is even much more sort of variegated and multifaceted. And part of that is about the sort of gaping inequality of the late 20th century and the early 21st century, in which you have black women both are in some ways the least wealthy, the poorest, the most precarious working positions, and in some regard the most successful, right? And so the sort of widening chasm of inequality that we talk about more generally in the United States and globally, I think really is sort of emblematic of the experience of what it is to be a black woman in this moment. The chasm is huge. We've got great success stories. You can mention any kind of media maven or popular celebrity, and then we've got expanding mass incarceration system that's impacting black women disproportionately. We know that even as rates of HIV/AIDS have been going down over the last several decades, they're going up among black women. So you have very much a kind of best of times and worst of times story under the banner of black women.
And what about the category of welfare women as a black female category? Does that exist anymore? I mean, the welfare system is pretty much being dismantled, so.
Yes, I think it doesn't, I don't know if it resonates with people as a category today in the way that it did in the 60s and 70s. I find that the welfare women an interesting category for black women because it was always intended to be disparaging and to be negative, right? But black women in the 60s, beginning in the 60s and certainly well into the 80s, sort of took it as a term of empowerment as well, really about the basic sort of needs and rights that everyone deserved, and really sort of laid a claim to the welfare state as a kind of universal, assemblage to which black women could also lay claim to. And of course then we have the Reagan years in which the welfare queen, right, which is a sort of spin-off of this, becomes a figure and popular political imaginary. So that one's been less, more challenging to sort of recoup or refigure as something that's been empowering. But I think that moment, was a useful moment for understanding what political scientists, and Melissa Harris Perry has written about this, sort of think about as the crooked mirror, right? That, part of what the welfare queen moment offers is, a realization, if ever there had been a doubt, that the public sphere and political, and particularly the sort of dirty work of politics, is never going to offer a reliable or accurate accounting of the lives and experiences of black women.